Hello, welcome to Vest Top 5. I'm your host, as always, Vest Guy. So we're in the month of October, and we're going to be talking about a lot of horror stuff. So I try to come up with a list of stuff that we can talk about, and one of the things I wanted to mention is a director that a lot of his movies, not all of them, but a lot of his movies are influential horror films. And that director is John Carpenter. If you watch movies like Get Out, It Follows, you're going to notice that they're heavily influenced by John Carpenter's work. He's made classic films that still stand out today. And one of the films on this list is actually a movie that's getting another sequel slash reboot. I don't know what the fuck it is, but Jamie Lee Curtis is back and she's looking for, what's that pill that she used? Activia?
Isn't that a yogurt?
As a yogurt? I thought it was a pill. I don't know. She does these crappy commercials, and I'm like, Michael Myers is no longer her sister. And anyway, so John Carpenter is a great director. Well, I want to say used to be, because the last movie he made was, well, the last couple of movies, Ghost of Mars was trash. The Ward was boring as fuck. But I still think if they gave him a good script or opportunity to direct something with a bigger budget, maybe he would do something worthwhile. But back in the day, even with no budget at all, he made some classic films. So we're going to go over the top 5 John Carpenter horror movies. Don't go all crazy, oh, why did you put Big Trouble in Little China? Well, it's not a horror movie. Oh, why isn't the Son of Precinct 13 here? It's an action movie, it's not a horror film. So I'm only putting those, and I'm also not going to put Escape from New York. So this might be a little controversial because there's some movies here from John Carpenter that don't get mentioned. And I think they're great. And they were underrated back then. And I still think they're underrated now, and they're good. And number 5 is In the Mouth of Madness. This movie stars Sam Neill, and it's basically Sam Neill trying to find this author of these like famous like horror novels that are making people go berserk. Whoever reads it becomes insane. So he's going to a town called Hobbs End, where supposedly this horror writer has been hiding there writing his last novel. And the publishers hire Sam Neill to find him because they need the final manuscript in order to publish the last book, which is called In the Mouth of Madness. I don't know if this movie had bad publicity, I don't know what it was, but this movie is actually genuinely scary. There's some weird-ass creepy imagery that gets no explanation. There's weird monsters, weird demons and shit that pop out of nowhere, and you have no explanation for it, and I like that. Sometimes you don't need an explanation in order to be genuinely scared. I like the fact that the town is completely quiet and everyone who appears there looks creepy as fuck, and there's very little to no CGI. This was actually during the early 90s where they were trying to push CGI. In The Mouth of Madness, which was released around that same time, has everything practical. Like there's some weird scenes where Sam Neill is like in this hell-like world and he's being chased by this weird like demonic thing that has tentacles, and it looks like something from the 80s. It looks like something that's equivalent to what you saw in The Thing. And Sam Neill's another actor that's very underrated. Everyone mentions him as, oh, it's Dr. Alan Grant from Jurassic Park. And sure, I guess he'll probably remembered for that role. But he does a really good job playing a guy who's slowly going crazy. And the way he plays himself, the character in the beginning, is just very straightforward guy who's an investigator who works for a publishing company. And as each sequence gets more outlandish and more crazy and more over the top, he's slowly descending into this mad world, and you kind of go along with him. And I love the ending of this film, which I won't reveal, but it's just, I don't think this type of ending would come out now. People will be like, what did I just watch? People typically, especially general audience, like a movie that has beginning, middle, and end, and everything is answered in a nice little bow and tie at the end. But this movie doesn't do that, at least to a certain degree. It makes you think in a way. And I like that in a horror movie. You know, it uses both effective like psychological horror and combines it with like, you know, gory monster crap in between. So I think it worked well, that balance. And also pay attention, there's a little cameo from John Carpenter in the movie. I won't say where he is, but he appears I think more than once from what I remember. Number 4 is another one that most people don't put on their list. Yes, this movie got a terrible sequel, but the original is good on its own, and that movie is Vampires. This was James Wood. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
What I like about this movie is the fact that if you get bitten, you can actually use like fire or something to like counterattack that infection. And no, and it breaks away from the norm of the typical mythology that you see in vampire movies. John Carpenter grabs a lot of genres that are pre-existing. Halloween was a pre-existence of the Alfred Hitchcock movies like Psycho. Even The Thing is also something that was pre-existing with the original 50s B movies. He grabs stuff from the past and he revamps it and makes it modern. Vampires is basically just another Dracula vampire movie, but it updates it with like leather coats and shit, and it's great cinematography and changing the mythos a little bit. No one mentions it. I don't even think it's available on Blu-ray. I think it's still available on a really crappy Clipper case DVD, but it still stands out. James Wood, actually, curiously enough, he's worked with a lot of directors that have made classic horror films. Not just John Carpenter. David Cronenberg is another one. He worked with him in Videodrome. The thing with vampires, though, is that, sure, the storyline in terms of like being their twist or anything like that, there's nothing like that. It's straightforward. They do change certain things, and I don't want to mention what things they change, aside from the fact that I just mentioned that, you know, if you get bitten, you can actually counterattack it. But it's actually pretty gory, and this is, again, during a time when CGI was starting to be pushed, and there's none of that. It's all practical effects. In most horror movies, they have adopted the same technique that they use in action films, where it's fast-paced cuts where you can't tell what the fuck is going on and everything's shaky. I can't stand that. When you watch vampires, though, you know, everything is landscapes, a lot of desert, and a lot of like scenes where it's not close-ups. You actually can see and discern what's going on in the screen in front of you. So definitely check out Vampires. I don't know if it's on streaming. I don't think it's on Blu-ray. I believe it's still just on DVD. But if you come across it, watch it. So number 3 is a movie that I mentioned in another list as being a terrible remake, but the original is good. And that original is The Fog, starring Jamie Lee Curtis. This was released during the time that Jamie Lee Curtis was still considered like the scream queen. She appeared in a lot of movies like Terror Train, Prom Night, Halloween, and The Fog. So she was extremely popular at the time, and you know, rightfully so, because she did a great performance in all these horror movies. But this one's not a slasher film. This is an atmospheric horror film, and I love the music in The Fog. It takes its time. I guess for modern audiences, this film was considered boring, because it takes time to get to the meat of the story, you know? If that's the kind of person you are, then fuck you. Just sit down one day and just watch this film and enjoy what's happening. It's literally just ghosts from the past coming into a town. It's a ghost story. Again, John Carpenter grabs a story that pre-existed before, a ghost story in a small town, and people are dying, and instead of making this like, you know, stupid, you know, gory mess, he makes a movie that's genuinely scary. And again, there's no jump scares. There's no music that's telling you, oh, you should be scared right now because the music is telling you, or a high-pitched noise. No, it's actually the unsettling, you know, sequences that are occurring. And I don't want to mention specific scenes because I will ruin specific plot points, but trust me, it's an effective horror film. And it's worth actually not just viewing, it's actually worth owning in my opinion. Number 2 is another movie that was on another list. You're going to see this movie on a lot of my lists because it's so great, and that's The Thing. I mentioned it before, and I don't want to talk about it too much because I already did, but I'll say it again. The Thing is literally an alien crash lands, and it's hiding in a host. Whether it be a dog, whether it be a human being, no one knows, and they're trying to survive in Antarctica, and you don't know who is the alien. Movie still works today. You can watch this movie on the big screen at a friend's house with a couple of beers, and you can still enjoy this movie as a good, genuine horror movie. It has great practical effects, has great acting from Kurt Russell, who I thought was very underrated in a lot of horror movies that he did back in the day. Now he's getting more recognition. The prequel that it got, which was terrible, they did the service by replacing a lot of the sequences with modern CGI. They overlaid the practical effects that were originally supposed to be in that film, and it ended up being a crappy, shitty movie. This one, on the other hand, the 1982 version, still holds up. It has great animatronics and great puppeteering work. Sure, you can have those things in the movie and not work because the story is whatever, but the story is great. You grabbed the original film that was released in the 50s and made a modern twist on it. Changed the whole aspect and modernized it. That's what John Carpenter should be noted more for modernizing a lot of like the horror things that we've seen in the past. He modernized the ghost story, he modernized the vampire story, and in The Thing, he modernized the typical alien invasion film. The movie also, at least for me, was not spoiling anything. At least it leaves a little open-ended, you know, and I like movies like that don't give you the answers right away. It's actually letting you think for once. So The Thing is definitely one of John Carpenter's best films. But what can top The Thing? So some people might disagree on my number one. They might say The Thing should be number one, but I'll explain why this particular movie is number one. And it's Halloween. So Halloween's getting a new movie, also called Halloween. This is the third movie, it's called Halloween. We had Halloween by Rob Zombie, and it was just called Halloween in the original. And that whole franchise is all over the fucking place. You can watch it in so many ways. You can watch Halloween and Halloween 2 and ignore the rest, or watch Halloween and Halloween 2 and then Halloween 3 and ignore the rest, or ignore Halloween 2 and Halloween 3 and go straight to Halloween 4, Return of Michael Myers, which ignores the events of part 3, and then watch 5 and 6, or you can ignore 4, 5, and 6 and watch Halloween 1 and 2 and then go to Halloween H2O and then watch Resurrection, or ignore all of them and just watch the Rob Zombie remake, or you can do what they're doing right now, which is ignore everything the fuck out and just watch the original and watch the new one, or you can do what I do, is like fuck everything that was made recently and just watch the original 2 films that were made by John Carpenter. Even though Halloween 2 was not directed by him, it was produced by him, and he wrote the screenplay, and at the time he wanted them to be siblings, and it has the same cinematographer, Dean Cunny, which he used in other films that he made. So the original Halloween, the reason why it's so innovative and still great is because, yes, from a technical aspect, The Thing is superior. The visual effects still hold up, the practical effects are amazing, and yes, to a certain degree, the story is more engaging, whereas Halloween is more straightforward. It's just a girl who's trying to survive a night in Halloween and a killer is on the loose. Very simplistic. But the reason why this movie is on my number one is because this movie literally invented the slasher genre. Sure, before Halloween you had Black Christmas, but this movie literally cemented the popularity in the slasher genre. Curious enough, the slasher genre was taken from the giallo genre, which was the Italian horror films like Suspiria, Deep Red, films like that, Tenebre, Torso. Those films came before it, which were inspired by Hitchcock. And curious enough, Hitchcock himself was inspired by some of those films, and that's how he made Psycho. And then John Carpenter was inspired by Psycho, inspired by those films that he made Halloween. And notice how there's very little to no gore. It just uses atmosphere. It uses good music and good cinematography, and the angles are wide angle takes, and there's no fast, quick edits like they did in the Rob Zombie remake and in the subsequent sequels. It's just a movie that takes its time. And that's why I also like Halloween 2, because it follows that same exact formula. It's not trying to be like old avant-garde and doing crazy shit that's just ridiculous with jump scares. This movie, it's literally just the unnerving of pure evil killing. And of course, John Carpenter said that's the reason why he doesn't want them to be siblings, which I think is ridiculous. There has to be some reasoning as to why he's killing this girl, being that in the beginning of the original Halloween, he killed his first sister, and he's back in town in Haddonfield, so he's back for the next one. It makes perfect sense, which was a reveal in the sequel. If this feels like a spoiler, my god, this movie has been out since 1978. Get with the program. So, Halloween is still a movie that every few years, people use as a reference to make their movies. It happened in the 90s with Scream. It's happening again now with Halloween and other slasher movies that are coming out. It's a movie that I think is still going to hold up for so many years. So when it comes to owning this movie is probably just like Night of the Living Dead. It's been released hundreds of times. Hundreds of times. I can't mention how many times Anchor Bay has re-released and remilked this version. The 20th anniversary, the limited edition, the ultimate tin can version with a flashlight. I don't know. There's so many versions, but the version that you should watch is the Blu-ray release that was approved by John Carpenter and Dean Cunny, which maintains the original color correction. What happened was that in 2006, when Blu-ray was still pretty new, they released a super, nice print that looks great technically. They literally turned all the scenes very bright and very nice. But the thing is that this movie was shot, I believe, in California in the summer, and they were trying to make it look like fall. So they used a film reel and they used the wrong notes, and they made the movie look like summer. So technically it does look well, but in terms of storyline it looks incorrect. So try to find the version that was authorized by John Carpenter that puts back the sequences that look like if it was shot on fall. Because keep in mind, this movie was a low-budget movie, and they didn't have the opportunity to shoot at the right period of time. So another thing is that there's an alternate version that you can find, which I prefer, which is the televised version that was released in 1982. They went back, and during the production of Halloween 2, they reshot scenes, and it actually ties in with Halloween 2 in respects to the whole sister thing. And I like that version. That version is available, I believe, as a standalone on a limited edition, and also on the commemorative box set that was released in 2015 on Blu-ray. It's on I believe, the last disc of that particular set. So Halloween 1 is the best John Carpenter movie for the fact that he successfully reinvented the giallo and psychological horror and turned it into a slasher, which is modernized and has influenced so many other directors and young filmmakers. So I hope you guys enjoyed this list. I'm Best Guy. I'm just a small little guy here on YouTube. I look a lot taller than I do here in the camera. I hope you enjoyed this video. If there's any other horror movie from John Carpenter, please don't mention The Ward. Please don't mention Ghosts of Mars. I know there's other ones that I could have mentioned, but I didn't. I didn't mention They Live, which I feel more is like a sci-fi movie, and I just don't like that sequence where they're fighting. It takes so long. It's a long sequence. But no, if there's anything else, please leave in the comment section down below. Make sure to stick around for more horror-themed videos from me, Best Guy, on this channel. Anyway, guys, until next time, bye.